Goodbye, Extreme Skyflyer. Goodbye, or so it seems. The attraction, which was set to celebrate its 30th anniversary season this year, now sits surrounded by signs of its retirement. According to Kings Island sources, the fencing around the pay shed and the concrete platforms, they've all been removed. Hello, everyone. Alongside Ryan Sir, I'm Don Helbig, and this is Tower Topics.
Tower Topics is a podcast by Kings Island fans for Kings Island fans, because that's who we are, and that, sir, is who we care about. Don, this is a bummer of an episode, but you know what brings up my mood? Talking to our members.
That's
so let's thank our members here of Tower Topics. I want to give out a shout out to some of the prestige members here, and that includes Aaron Bort, 330T, Logan Lipper, Brian Hauser, Lil Mac 21, Miss Mandy 1983, Jacob Fix, Stephen Hornack, Eric Grau, Ian Crawford, Damon Barnes, and our newest member, Dustin Jackson. Thank you guys so much for being members of Tower Topics at the highest level. That's the prestige level. If you want to be involved in Tower Topics, there's a link in the description. Members get early access to the videos, exclusive content, exclusive live streams, and some tiers even get some free stuff.
So Ryan, Extreme Skyflyer, I don't think you and I had that on our bingo card when we were talking about attractions that potentially could be retired maybe as early as this year, next year. It's always sad to see something go. It's about to turn 30 this year, but because it's an upcharge attraction, I don't think there's going to be the outpouring of disappointment in that you would have seen had it been a ride like the Bat, the Monster, Congo Falls.
Yeah, I agree. Honestly, it's funny. I was thinking about this today before we recorded, and the phrase "not on our bingo card" certainly came to mind. But at the same time, it should have been. It actually should have been a pretty likely
It actually should have been. You're right.
Well, mainly because they're removing it at a lot of the other Six Flags properties.
Yeah, we knew something was going to have to go. I mean, just look around the chain. I mean, there's some parks have lost 3 or 4 rides. So we knew that Kings Island was going to have to give something up. And this appears to be what they have settled for to remove for this year. I don't think it was something, I have seen on social media since, word has gotten out about this, that they didn't give everyone a chance to get their last opportunity to experience it last year in the fall. I don't think they really knew about this until recently. I think this was a late decision that happened after the first of the year, and it wasn't something that they knew last year and could have given people that opportunity. I think there were other rides that were up for discussion, and then it just kind of settled on this.
Right, and their reasoning is that's up for debate, and we'll certainly discuss that. But I don't think that this carries the nostalgia that a Bat or a Monster and so on it would carry. I mean, I've ridden this once in my life. That's one too many times, I might add. I hated it because the whole dropping thing is just not something that I love. It seems like the people that have a lot of affection for this rider, especially people that worked on it, I do feel for those people. But I don't think that there's not a Don Helbig for the Sky Coaster. There's nobody that is ridden it 14,000 times or whatever. That's not like a site controller where they get to do it for free. But with that being said, you got to be careful with your thought process, because this was almost certainly somebody's favorite ride or somebody's last ride with their dad or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. And like for me, it was one of my daughter's favorite attractions. So when she was young, she'd always be like trying to pull me into Action Zone to do it. She loved it. No concept of how much it was costing us every time that we did it, but for her, that was one of her favorites. So yeah, I mean, she's going to be disappointed with this news. There's other people that are going to be disappointed, but again, not to that level, because it's an upcharge attraction that you would have had it been the Bat, Congo Falls, Invertigo, Monster, one of those kind of rides.
Don, it's funny because we're having this discussion. There isn't a whole lot to say about it, but there's 2 burning questions left. The why, we'll get to that. We have theories. And the does it stop here?
Correct. And if you look at the park's website, it still shows, as of this
Mhm.
recording, Extreme Skyflyer. If it's being removed, why is it still on, the website? Why not just let people know? They're going to find out anyway.
Right.
So why not just, make the statement, get it over with, and then you're on to your next thing? Because again, people know. We know from talking with people that work at Kings Island that they had not assigned a ride crew
Mhm.
for this. They had, their recent, thing at the park where they started to give out the assignments, who was going to be supervisors where and everything. This ride wasn't on the list. So that was kind of the first uh, sign that it wasn't going to be operating this year, was going to be removed. And then, you find that they've taken down the fence. Well, now they've, torn down the pay shed. Oh, they ripped up the concrete. Normally you take the ride out first before you do all that. But yeah, I mean, all signs point to it's being retired. There's just too much adding up that it's going to be there.
Yeah. Now, to play devil's advocate, you mentioned you normally remove the ride first, but I think this is kind of a slam dunk the way they're doing it because Kings Island can tear up the concrete. Kings Island can remove the fence. They're going to have to bring in a company to take down the archway and all that
They
stuff. So
will.
they're
Now this won't
probably
take
waiting
that
on that.
long. Yeah, it won't take that long to do. It's not like you're dismantling a roller coaster. It's it went up pretty quick. It'll come down pretty quick.
I wonder if it's one of those situations where this gets disassembled and sent back to Sky Coaster, or they just cut it. You know, it'll be very interesting. I think we did an episode on Extreme Skyflyer with
Hmm.
Mark Rosenwig. I always mispronounce his name. I'm sorry, Mark. I know you listen, but he mentioned I think that when Ride Entertainment brokered the deal, that the park had bought it outright. So I'm not sure if it's going back to them or if it's going to the scrap heap or not. Um, Now, why did they remove it? What's your theory?
It's a cost cutting move, like there was at other parks.
Okay.
It it performed well. You look at other Sky Flyers in the chain and that. I mean, it performed well, but it just seems like they just told every park you got to cut something, and parks have lost staffing, they've lost rides. So I think that's the reason. What are you going to lose to save some labor in that here? You know, you figure, what is it, 3 or 4 people to operate per day? Take the money that they make per hour. It's a nice little chunk of change that they're going to be able to save by not having this ride open or attraction.
Yeah, and I wonder if this is in some ways like a middle finger to corporate, like saying you have to remove a ride. Okay, we're going to remove a ride that takes 4 people, but it also costs between $10 and $25 to ride. So I buy into the cost savings thing, I really do. But at the same time, it's just so strange that a ride that actively generates revenue would be removed for a cost saving reason.
Yeah, I was
I've
never a fan of the upcharge attractions like that and Slingshot. When I thought of those kinds of attractions, I think of like the Old Town fun spots, like in
Yeah.
Orlando. That's the perfect place for those. When you think of Kings Island, you're not really thinking of that. For so many years, from like '72 until '95, when this was built, and they had a couple of other things there, but it was one of those pay one price, and you got to experience everything. Well, now you had to pay for this, and then a couple other things you had to start to pay for, and that wasn't kind of what Kings Island was in the '70s and '80s and early '90s. So it was kind of a little bit different, kind of a misfit for me. I don't think when you look at a park like Kings Island or Cedar Point or Carowinds, uh, you're not really looking at it as having this type of an attraction, or why you go there specifically to do this type of attraction. You come across it, you do it, but it wasn't anything that you're sitting at home looking at the website and you're going, "We're all going to Kings Island because they got Skyflyer."
My family would totally. I'm just kidding. I'm the only person in my family that has ever or will ever ride a sky coaster. Um, so the other thought is this. So 2026 Family Thrill. That's a good plot of land right there.
It is a good plot. That was one of the first things I thought of too. Was it could go there. Maybe that, that's part of the removal, or maybe they hadn't placed where 2026 was going to go yet. Maybe they were thinking vortex spots. There's a couple other spots in the park where you could put something in. Uh, but yeah, this is prime, real estate now. A lot of space to work with when you're talking about a family thrill type ride. So say it is some kind of a coaster or something, and it's 2,800 to 3,500 feet long, something like that fits that spot. You can make it work there. I still maintain, and I have since they removed it, that in the vortex spot, that one has to be like your new signature attraction. I think it has to be something that's really special. If it's not, that ride's not going to get off to a good start. People are going to be dumping on it before it even opens. They're going to say they got rid of vortex for this. So it better be, something really, really good, really special in that spot. And the longer it takes to fill that spot, the more pressure there is going to be on the park to make sure that is what goes in that spot.
Yeah, I mean, I could just see it now. They put in the Zamperla thing that we were speculating about, and people are like, "Well, this is Kings Island of today. You take out, a multi-loop record-breaking roller coaster, and you put in this, But I don't think it would have that kind of effect if it went where Extreme Skyflyer is/was. Now, one thing I will point out is this is an incredibly flat plot of land too.
Mm-hmm.
That makes it kind of valuable. Now, I kind of assumed that you know they would take it out, but it would just be a plot, kind of like Vortex. But if the fences are down and stuff, I wonder if you'll be able to walk through that area.
That's a good point. I don't know. I do think this, now that this is going, that if you do put the 2026 family thrill attraction in that spot, now you're set up to not only have that new ride for 2026, but you have a retheme of the action zone area for 2026.
Action Zone will get a retheme. We talk about buy or sell, and we'll get to that. Within the next 10 years, it's not going to be, and within the next 5 years, it's not going to be
Mm-hmm.
Action Zone. Because Action Zone is stupid now. It was great 20 years ago. Now, the thing I don't want to see is I don't want to sacrifice like Banshee's theme. If it
Depends
becomes
on what
Warner
they
Brothers.
retheme it to.
Yeah, well, I mean, if it becomes Warner Brother, not Warner, is it Warner? No, it's not Warner Brothers. It's DC Comics. That's the other one. DC Comics. I don't want to see it become Batman. I think that would be kind of lame.
No, they got enough Batmans in the chain. I think it needs to be something a little different. But I don't
Yeah,
mind if they change the name, as long as there's kind of it gives it a nice total revamp, new look. It just has a whole new vibe to it. Um, yeah, I'd be okay with renaming every attraction in that area of the park.
I guess that's true. I mean, honestly, well, okay. Well, speaking of that area of the park, let's move on to the whole. Does it stop here? Because that is adjacent to Congo Falls, Drop Tower.
Phones and Vertigo.
It's in Vertigo, and Vertigo's right down the road. You talk about, everyone's talked about Kings Island's front gate coaster, like the thought of a front gate coaster. And I know that, like, you bring up, like, they probably wouldn't put it over the front gate because of logistically, it's a little bit more difficult there than it is at Cedar Point and other places like that. But you talk about a coaster that goes along the front of the park that really just defines the park and makes it so it's like signature, and that'll sell t-shirts and all sorts of stuff. This could be step one in something like that.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
I'm 50-50. I think that there's a 50% chance that most of the rides in Action Zone will be gone after 2026 anyway. I think
I'm
that
starting to feel like, yeah, if you're going to Kings Island this year, be sure to get in those rides on Drop Tower, on in Vertigo, Congo Falls, the Bat. Just make sure. Don't leave anything to doubt. So when it gets to the end of the fall season, that you've got enough rides in case they do something. And a lot of these rides are removed, and then nobody's gonna feel that they didn't get that chance to get their last rides. Just go assuming that these rides might not be around for the long term, and just enjoy them. Make sure you ride them. Don't skip it during your visit. and think, well, I'll get it next time, because the next time it might not be there.
Take nothing for granted anymore. Who would
That's
have
right.
thought? Who would have thought in July that King Ka would be removed and Green Lantern at that?
Nobody did. Nobody
Nobody.
had that.
And then the people that were finding out that were saying it were called liars. It's like I don't. That's not a referendum on anybody that said that, because I think people didn't want to believe it, but here we are.
No, I mean, for us though, I mean, before we would go with an episode like this or something that I put on my X about it, looking like it's retired, we make sure that we cross check and get multiple sources on it, so we're just not taking what someone says real quick and just throwing it out there, hoping to get hoping that it sticks. We make sure that we feel really good about what we've been told before we go with it. And again, with this, a little surprising because there wasn't anything going on in January, most of February, and then here we are, the last week of February. It's happening with this, where the other ones, Carowinds, it was end of November, December. They were talking about it, that they were going to remove some rides. You had King Call. King Call was done before we got to that time of the year. So I think for them, I just don't think, I go back to, I just don't think this was something that in October they knew. November they knew that it was happening. I think it was something that they, fought hard, but they had to lose something. And that's just the way it's going around the chain. I mean, just, a lot of the parks, have lost a ride or two or three. So it could be a lot worse at Kings Island.
It could, because it could have been the Bat. That seemed like the most likely culprit, honestly. Perhaps in Vertigo, but if I had to choose one ride to lose, the upcharge one's a pretty good one.
That's right. Yeah, I don't mind losing the upcharge attractions.
Yeah. So I did reach out to the park spokesperson for a quote on the removal of Extreme Skyflyer, and this is what they had to say.
And I've never ever been on live television. I never ever be on live television.
I'm just totally kidding. No, this is actually what they said.
Well, Ryan, you did the right thing, though. I mean, we talked about it and we said, this is happening. We're going to do an episode on it.
Mm-hmm.
Let's at least give the park the chance to respond.
Mm-hmm.
Give them an opportunity to control the narrative of the story rather than, just whatever we're able to gather, becomes part of that story. And, you got the crickets there.
Sure. Yeah. And it's as blatant as possible. I was very pleasant with the email and I said, hey, I hope you're doing well. I'm hearing this. Do you want to say something about it? Or do you want us to go with the line that everybody seems to use? And that's a spokesperson from Kings Island could not be reached. Unfortunately,
unavailable for comment. Cannot be reached.
Unavailable for comment. So unfortunately, in this day and age of actually having to do your job, some choose not to do it, and we were unable to reach the park for comment. Which
I mean, you're going to have to face the music and talk about it at some point anyway. So sometimes it's better to get that done in February than have it be 2 weeks or so before the start of the season, and then the news media actually finds out about it and starts paying more attention because opening day's just around the corner. And now instead of what you have new for this year being the lead story, it's what's not there anymore becomes the lead story.
And what a terrible story. Like what, I mean, if they had made this blunder for the Vortex, at least that would be a major ride was removed. But if the narrative is shipped from Kings Island's opening for the 2025 season to Kings Island's opening for the 2025 season and missing a ride over this, like heads should roll.
Yeah. So you want to get this out there earlier. So I would rather have people, there's going to be negativity about it. You deal with that. Something like this will be over with, within a quick cycle, 48, 72 hours. No one's talking about this ride being removed anymore because of what it is compared to what it could have been. But if you wait and you get into mid-March, late March, this now becomes part of your opening weekend story of what's not there. And you don't want that. You want everybody excited about the new season and, the different things that are going on, new food items, new merchandise. But it will become part of that story because here we are, we're about ready to roll into March.
Yeah. So I've heard this rumor that a certain spokesperson thinks that we're nobodies, so nobody tells us information, but is paranoid to the point now where they think that their offices are bugged. Have you heard something about this?
Ryan, I can, being paranoid and that. I mean, yeah, we've had things that, like I said, people have told us, and we're talking about the racer being open for Winterfest when they hadn't put that out there yet. We talked about the discussions about the operating calendar, and apparently that hit pretty close to home. That we were able to find that out. But it is absolutely ridiculous to think that we would have somebody say on the inside, um, take one of those pens that you could buy for like $129 off Amazon and have it stashed in someone's office behind, say, on a shelf where there's bobbleheads and things like that, or to the right of their computer at their desk, there's a stack of folders and stuff, and have it like placed in there, and be recording these conversations and getting information. I mean, that's just ridiculous for someone to be paranoid that we're doing something like that.
I think the thing I would be paranoid about is if there's secondary devices. Like, it's easy to find a bugged pen, but what if there's a bugged picture frame or book or really anything? I mean, if you go on Amazon, there's all these things out there, and they're so good now that you could probably like read an entire book and not know that it has a microphone in it.
We're getting too much credit if they think we're bugging an office. But we both have heard those stories from different people at the party, that there's that paranoia that they must be tapping in the conference calls. They must be doing something because they're hearing these things and no one's talking to them. So there's no way that they could find these things out. But, no reason to be paranoid. We know a lot of people, that work at the park, and people talk to us, people like us, and, you just have to accept that, we have that going for us.
I think what you're trying to say, Don, is that we hear things.
We hear things, yes. Yeah, nothing escapes. And there's a lot of things that have come to our attention that we've not talked about. We just let it go, and we could. And then later on, we find out, they had to announce it, or, other guests found out about it and stuff. But we don't share every single thing. It's not like we're sleuths trying to find stuff. It's just things become of interest that we think our audience is going to have an interest in. The operating calendar was one of those things. The racer being open for Winterfest, one of those things. Extreme Skyflyer, it's one of those things. So when we get information like that, yeah, we're going to talk about it. But you did give them a chance to respond and either confirm, deny this was happening, and you got crickets.
At least I got crickets, though. All right.
Yeah. But did you expect that you were going to get a reply?
I would have been. So when I emailed the spokesperson, I got an automatic reply saying, "Hey, I'm out of office till Wednesday, but on Wednesday I'll get back to you." And when I saw like the email come back, I almost dropped my phone. Like, there's no way they reply. Oh, it's an auto response. So over one workday plus a few hours to respond, they chose not to do their jobs, unfortunately. Don, let's move on to a segment we like to call Buy or Sell.
Buy or sell. All right. So, Ryan, by 2035, we're talking 10 years down the road here, Kings Island will build a hotel on its property. Are you buying or selling?
I'm buying. I think that they're so on-site amenities are a huge margin driver. They're a huge revenue driver. I think that they're going to look at a lot of the properties and wonder why they haven't done that. Now, granted, Kings Island has Great Wolf Lodge right next door, but you're not staying on property there. So if they might do a partnership with La Quinta or something like they did it, like, Carowinds or whatever. But I think that opportunity's there. I think it's theirs to grab. And I think 10 years is long enough for them to realize that and to break ground. What about you?
Timberwolf location?
I didn't even think about that, but yeah. I imagine if it overlooked the park, like kind of like Helios at Epic Universe.
Mm-hmm.
In that way, right now, and we've discussed this at length, so I don't want to go too deeply into it, but Kings Island has always been a regional park. Due to some incompetence in the past couple of years, it's become like a local park. But I think that once certain people are replaced and maybe certain people are in like other leadership positions, like
Mhm.
from a corporate standpoint, they're going to say like, "No, wait, the opportunities there. How do we draw in people from Indianapolis and Cleveland and Louisville and stuff?" And having on-site amenities is a great way to drive that forward.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a need. So for me, if we're going 10 years, yes, I'll buy, but I think it'll be toward the end of that 10-year period. I do think had the merger not taken place and the finances had been a little bit in better shape, I think we might have seen that, or at least an announcement that it was coming, or something a little sooner than 10 years. But yeah, I think it is something that's needed. And once they got rid of the campground and they no longer had the ownership and managing the hotel across the street, the Kings Island Inn, uh, you no longer had people coming in and spending 4 or 5 days from out of town, on the property or across the street like that. So Indianapolis, Columbus, Louisville, West Virginia, Pittsburgh, those markets saw a little bit of a decrease in visitations in that because they weren't getting those extended stays anymore. But if you put a hotel in there, on property, I think that changes and it makes it, something that it becomes more of a destination place to go. Because there's other things to do, while you're in Cincinnati area too. Besides Kings Island, you'd want to visit the zoo, go to a Reds game. You time it out right. You got the tennis tournament across the street. If the park's not closed at that point in time because of what the school schedule is and that. But there's a lot of things going on in the area that you could make your vacation week in Mason, Ohio, if Kings Island had their an on-site hotel there, and you'd get those multiple visits. So I'm going to buy like you.
Have you thought about this? So the property that was the Kings Island Inn, that was going to be developed into apartments. The city of Mason was against it. So ultimately, I believe the church next door, Rivers Crossing, bought it. But I don't think they have any intention whatsoever of doing anything with it because they would have done it by now. It's been like 6 or 7 years.
It's just kind of
I
an
think they're
eyesore
holding.
now.
I think they're holding it for an investment, and I think that might be a really good spot for a new hotel. Actually,
It could be, yeah. If it's close enough to being on property. You could get the shuttle buses and that to take you across the street to the park and that. So it could work.
absolutely. Cool. Let's move on to some Six Flags headline news. So this past weekend, Cedar Point hosted Winter Chill Out, which gives coaster enthusiasts, Cedar Point enthusiasts, the rare opportunity to see Cedar Point during the off season, and it's even for a good cause. It was for a kid again. For more information on this, let's bring in Tower Topics official field reporter Noah. Hey Noah, welcome to Tower Topics.
Hi.
Hey, so my understanding is that you got to attend Winter Chill Outs this past Saturday, but this was your first visit, but you didn't even know you were going to go. Why don't you tell us how you found out?
Well, my mom and dad were teasing me, saying that they were just going to go. And until the last night before, my dad pulled up the ticket, and then I'm like, I'm going. And I got super excited.
Yeah.
So what was there for you to see and do?
So we got to go in the sign shop, we got to go see the llamas, and we got to walk past the Snake River Falls. And then we did go where the Siren's Curse train was.
How does that look?
It's pretty sick.
Yeah, the Siren's Curse train. That sounds like it's going to be really, really cool. Now, you never got to experience Top Thrill Dragster, right? Or Top Thrill 2, because you're just now tall enough for those kind of rides. Did they give us any updates on Top Thrill 2?
Yeah.
Can you share those updates with us?
They did have a crane with a cord attached to the track.
Mm-hmm.
And they had this little like thing on it, and they were surveying the track.
Yeah,
They,
if you look at the track pieces, I saw this online. Our friend Ryan, the ride mechanic, has some excellent videos. But if you look at the little burn marks that are around, it looks like they're trying to straighten the track out. Did they say anything about that, or did they kind of keep that hush hush?
no.
They didn't. So, are you excited for Siren's Curse? Are you going to be talking up for that?
Very excited.
Did you learn anything new about Siren's Curse?
No.
Well, I heard.
Yeah, go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, I heard that we learned during Winter Chill Out that there's going to be onboard audio.
Yeah,
so the trains are going to play music.
There's speakers built into the train that are going to play different music as you like tilt and you go through the ride and stuff.
Yeah.
Does it look pretty cool? Real impressive looking?
Yeah, it's very, very cool. Like there was strobe lighting and stuff on the train, and it would play this crazy music and the lights would go crazy flickering.
Oh, that's so cool. You obviously got to see the Siren's Curse train, and you mentioned seeing the llamas and the Top Thrill 2 track. What was your favorite part of Winter Chill Out this year?
It has to be going through the sign shop. They did have a Snake River Falls sign hung up in there, and they had a lot of signs.
Yeah, they did. Well, Noah, before we part with you, is there anything else that you wanted to tell the Tower Topics listeners about Winter Chill Out, and would you recommend it when the tickets go on sale next year?
Yes, it is very cool and very fun because you get to go behind the scenes. You get to do what you don't really get to do sometimes, and you get to go like see what they do and park services and stuff like that.
Well, that's amazing, Noah. Noah, we always appreciate your help here on Tower Topics. For those of you who, if you recognize Noah, he was part of our panel at the meetup at Scene 75 a few weeks ago. Additionally, he's been in the Haunt Lantern video and the Bubble Wand video. So Noah is always very helpful for us for boots on the ground. But we really appreciate you taking the time to tell us about Winter Chill Out.
Yep.
Don, tell us about the t-shirts.
Tower Topics t-shirts are available $22 and includes shipping. Any size that you need. Comes in a wicked green color this year with the Tower Topics logo prominently displayed in the front of the shirt. If you're interested in one, just send a direct message to us on our X, which is Tower_Topics, or you can drop me an email at donhelbig@themeparksbydon.com. I'll send you back the QR code once the transaction goes through. Just a matter of days before you get your shirt.
Perfect. Yeah, $22 including shipping. Pricing did not go up, but the cost on us did. So you're welcome.
It did, yes. Very much so.
All right. We'll be right back with the listener questions.
All right. Question number 1 comes from Kevin from Ohio. He says, I never had the chance to ride Tomb Raider, the ride. Was the theming and use of props really on par with something you'd expect from Disney or Universal?
So nowadays, no, because the stuff that they do is so incredibly mind-blowing. Now, granted, this was 20 years ago, 25 years ago,
Right.
But I remember the first time I went to Universal, which was 2008, thinking like Tomb Raider, the ride would sit on the same shelf as anything here. Now, this is before Harry Potter and stuff, but yeah, I would say so. I would say like 2002 Tomb Raider, the ride versus 2002 Disney and Universal. Yes.
Yeah, I agree. It was on par with that. Very much what you would have seen at Disney, at least in the 80s and early 90s, period. But it was very well done. It just didn't work. But it was, something that, really you didn't expect to see something of that level with the theming and all the different effects at a Kings Island, back in the day when this debuted. But it's just unfortunate it didn't have a longer run.
Yeah. All right. Next, our old buddy Jorge from Blanchester, Ohio. He
Is that
started
George
off
or
full-
Jorge? Did you go George or Jorge?
Well, Jorge, I think is Jorge, but yeah, whatever. It's baffling that you two continue to put up this train wreck of a podcast 3 times a week. Aw, thank you. Don desperately clinging on to relevance and Ryan still searching for it. It's just sad. This
It
mess
is.
cannot go on. And I urge all Kings Island fans to stop listening to you ramble about how the park supposedly wronged you because you didn't get a free hush puppy with your meal. So it's just me that needs to stop, or you too? Because you never said anything about a hush puppy.
No, I never did. But I
That
complained a
said-
lot about the racer only running one side for the first couple hours.
Hey,
of the
he
day and the
didn't
last
say
couple
anything
hours
about
of
that.
the
He said hush pup. Anyway,
Okay.
he said, that said, I do have a question. Is it true that Kings Island tried to buy Cedar Point in the early 70s? Toodaloo. Okay, if he's saying he's imploring people not to listen to the show and then asks a listener question, so he clearly listens to the show. Don, I believe this is true, but I don't think it was the 70s.
Yeah, it was the 70s.
It was the 70s.
Yeah, 1973, there was a proposal that was out there. Taft Broadcasting had opened Kings Island the year before. They were looking to acquire some other parks. So that proposal was made, but nothing ever came about it. So 1973.
Didn't Paramount try to buy Cedar Fair too? Like when they were just Cedar Point and Valley Fair? Have you heard that?
They might have. They might have. The one I know for sure is 1973. That was. I remember seeing that. There was a scrapbook of Kings Island articles that I was going through for the 50th anniversary, and I remember seeing a little snippet about that. But I think if you search it on Google and you put maybe Tap Broadcasting trying to buy or proposing to buy Cedar Point or something, maybe something will come up for you. But I do know 1973 was the year when that was a possibility, and it was in the Cincinnati media. I remember, that was one of the first times I even heard of Cedar Point. Really, to be honest, was that Kings Island might acquire it. And then after, it's funny how things work. Sometimes you never hear about something, and then that comes about, and the next thing all these commercials on TV are saying, Cedar Point had the cure for the summertime blues or something like that. That was the commercial in the 70s all the time. So yeah, it became very much in my face after that.
Yeah.
Next, we have Lindy from Blue Hash, Ohio. She says, I'm very disappointed with the early rides lineup this year. One adult ride and a couple of kiddie rides each month. Why do they keep giving pass holders less every year, but raise the price? That's a very good question, Lindy.
I don't know. It's okay. So here, the thing I don't know for sure is the early ride stuff. Is it popular? Like I honestly have no idea. I don't go to it. I'm a 5 o'clocker, as I've said before. Does the early ride stuff even matter, or is it one of those things where they can list it as another benefit on the
Well, they
pass?
do push it as a big time. One of the most important benefits is early ride time every operating day, except for Fridays during haunt. So they bring that up all the time. But I do agree, where if it's just one adult ride and then some, kiddie rides, that's kind of a problem. They open the gates at 9:30. By the time a lot of them even get through, it's 9:40, 9:45. You get back to the ride. It still might be 10:15, 10:20 before you even ride. They have Snoopy Soapbox Racers is one of the early rides. Let's talk about that. One train, low capacity. You might get 5 or 6 cycles in a 30-minute window. That's not going to be a lot of riders. So what is that? 180 riders, maybe 200 riders that they can get in that half hour. Franklin's Flyers, very slow, to load and unload. And especially if they have one person that has to walk around and check every single one of them, that might only go 4 or 5 different cycles in that time. So for that, very few people actually get to take advantage of the early rides. It's not like you're going to get 4 or 5 rides in on Mystic Timbers or the Beast or Orion before the park opens. That just doesn't happen. I think what this really does with the early rides is it gives you an opportunity to be among the first in line for the rides that are part of this lineup. But yeah, it has been scaled back, though. There's not as many rides open as there had been before.
I I think that I remember like when Diamondback opened, there were a lot of people that showed up for that.
But
Um,
they had an hour too of early rides. When I
they
first
did
started,
have
it
an
was an hour.
hour. But you know, when you haven't added a major coaster in 5 years now, uh, I don't know where people's heads are. As far, like I said, I wish I had better data as to how many people actually take advantage of this because it could be way more than I think. But for me, it's always been such a tertiary thing. You know, I want to have the free parking. I want to have the 10% discount. Honestly, if they got rid of their early rides, like I would be upset on behalf of a gold pass holder, but for me personally, I wouldn't care.
Now, sometimes what happens, and this is from my experience working there, is sometimes the individuals that were putting the ride lineup together didn't really know how capacity works.
Right.
And there was like they had those, remember the nights where it was Mystic Timbers that they had it open for, an hour after the park closed just for pass holders and that. And then they would come back. We don't need to do this next year. Only 700 people took
Mhm.
advantage of it. Well, that's all that can ride in an hour. That's why only 700 people took advantage of it. So you got people that don't really understand it sometimes making these decisions. But yeah, I do know for sure in looking over what the early ride lineup was that there's not as many rides as there had been, especially on the adult side. There's 3 or 4 kids rides, and then there's like one. If Orion's open, then it's 3 rides maybe in Planet Snoopy or Camp Snoopy. If Mystic Timbers is open, same kind of thing. So from that perspective, yeah, a little disappointing. But let's look at what it really is. When you have a half hour, and by the time everybody can get into the park, if they open the gates even earlier, and everybody could be inside by 9:30, it'd be a little bit better. But when they wait till 9:30 to do it, and they're scanning people, and then sometimes people were getting their pictures and that taken, it's just backs it up. I just don't think the value is really there in terms of being that something that you're really pushing out as one of your key benefits. For me, there's no value. Like I said, I don't worry about it because I don't really see the value. If I get into the park and it's 5 till 10 or whatever, and I walk back to the racer, the carousel, the beast, whatever, that's fine. I don't need to have the ride open 30 minutes before. You and I talked at one time about an idea of getting rid of the early rides and then like once a month having the park open until midnight for
Mhm.
gold pass holders and the prestige pass holders. And that would really add a tremendous amount of value. And then if you did that and you had all of the park open still, labor wise, doing that in June, July, and August, it's probably still going to, come out more in your favor. You're going to save a little bit more money than it would if you did these early rides every single day for 100 and something days a year.
Oh, certainly, and it would probably be more special and more well attended too. But they don't ask me these things, Don.
No, they don't.
All right.
They should.
Next, I know. Next question, Todd from Coleraine, Ohio. Todd said, Don, you spent nearly 2 decades working at Kings Island. If you had the opportunity to work at another Cedar Fair park during that time instead of Kings Island, which one would you have chosen and why?
Let's talk about the word work first. I always said throughout my work career, if you enjoyed what you're doing, it doesn't feel like work. So it never felt like
Oh,
work.
did you come up with that?
No. Well, I felt that way. Okay. But anyway, I always felt
well,
that.
hold on. Let me make that joke again. Don, did you come up with that?
No, did not come up with that. But I've always felt that. Okay. How about that? I felt like because I enjoyed what I was doing, it never felt like work for almost 20 years. But if I hadn't worked at Kings Island and I had to work at another, you said Cedar Fair Park, correct?
Yes, Cedar Fair Park.
I would have chosen to spend those years working at Carowinds. And the reason being is I spent a year in Greensboro, North Carolina, working for a hockey team, the Carolina Monarchs in the American Hockey League. Absolutely loved North Carolina. I never would have left if it weren't for the Hartford Whalers relocating to North Carolina and knocking my team out of our lease at the Greensboro Coliseum. I would have stayed there the rest of my career if the team in Greensboro had stayed. Just because of that, just liking the area, I would have wanted to probably go to Carowinds. I think that would have been the place. And then I did have a couple of different stints there, interim PR roles, when Intimidator opened in 2010. So I spent, enough time there that I was, actually the one planning and executing the media event and that on the PR side. And then again for Fury 325, there were between PR people. So I had a couple of different work stints there, and just the people that worked at the park, really good people. I would have been a good fit to work with that team there. So I'm going to go with Carowinds. What about you, Ryan? If you had to work at a park that wasn't Kings Island in the Legacy Cedar Fair chain?
Knott's Berry Farm.
Not fair. Okay.
Because I feel like, to the nth degree, the Legacy Cedar Fair chain, and this may still be true, it hasn't shaken out yet, but it's very much a have and has nots kind of situation. Fortunately, our favorite park, Kings Island, is a have for the most part.
Yeah.
Knott's Berry Farm is a park where they do install rides and stuff like that, but more importantly, they care about details and entertainment and festivals and stuff like that. So I would say that if I had to pick a park besides Kings Island to work at, it would be Knott's.
Yeah, and I think too, going back to Carowinds, for me, what I did with PR, I think that's a good market to be in, because there's a lot of places, North Carolina, where you have media in Greensboro, Winston-Salem, Raleigh, all those different places like that. You would have 3 or 4 hours away, you've got the Tennessee, Knoxville, that media. You've got Georgia, CNN, all those different places like that. So for me, that also would have been a great opportunity to pitch the park stories, and there was a pretty good part of the region where you would have been able to get a lot of earned media coverage for your park there.
Yeah, lots of opportunity. And Carowinds to that effect too is it's probably still considered a high growth park. Like, I know that they had done a bunch of construction probably 10 years ago to do things like widen midways and stuff, just knowing that the crowds were not going to be 1.7 million people for very long. It was going to be more up closer to the 2.5 to 3 million bucket.
Yeah, and I always liked that park. I had a season pass when I lived in Greensboro, so for half of the summer in 96, and then the first half of the summer of 97 before I came back to Cincinnati, I would go to Carowinds on the weekends, and that I loved the park. It was fun. They had rides that were similar to what I had grown up with at Kings Island. They had Thunder Road, so it was kind of like riding the racer and that. So yeah, I mean, I've always been a longtime fan of Carowinds, so that's where I would have wanted to go.
Very cool. Great question. Hey, I'm Ryan Sir, along with Don Helbig. This is Tower Topics.